Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala syarafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, all praise be to Allah who gave us the opportunity to continue our work in da'wah and also to develop our post-Islamic psychology model and our training program, free life coach training program, which inshallah our intention is over the next 10 years to train 12,000 life coaches all over the world to serve the ummah at their mosques, NGO, universities, clubs, and so on. Alright, so we have our 4 module in terms of becoming an expert in Islamic, post-Islamic psychology model, that is Islamic psychology motivation, Islamic psychology coaching, Islamic psychology mentoring and counseling, and we have 600 over videos. But don't worry, you only do 30 videos and you get yourself certified, and very easily you can then serve the ummah and do a practical. Alright, so we also now embarking on the Islamic psychology research. So you go to YouTube, psychology research PIP. What PIP means, positive Islamic psychology, that we have to tackle the current dilemma of humanity at individual level, family level, societal level, and so on. And we are emphasizing our research on consciousness, mind-body relationship, heart-based cult research, positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy, spiritual, emotional, mental integration research, and positive Islamic psychology research overall. So what does Islamic psychology, positive Islamic psychology entails? As the word says, we try to be positive as much as we can within the challenges and the framework of this dunya. And the psychology that we try to bring is a balance, a just balance of being a true and sincere servant of Allah, His steward, His Khalifa on this earth, and expressing our fullness of Iman and Islam and Ihsan. So what we are doing now is now talking about the self, the family, and societal and global. So now I'm talking about the existential threat to human existence. That means all of us. At the self level, we know that if, for example, the global level is imbalanced, then we will have trouble, because Allah tells us in many verses of the Quran that He has created everything in balance. The world, the ecology, the animals, the birds, the bees, and everything is within a just balance. If we upset that balance, we destroy this earth. So we are now at a critical juncture of human existence, all right? Because at the global level, we have this denial of what is going to happen to us within the next 30 years. Wallahu alam, many scientists, climate experts have mentioned this over and over again, and there is a prediction. For example, the famous environmentalist, elderly now, David Suzuki, world famous environmentalist, says it is very, very late. It's not too late, but very, 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 very late. He says that 90%, 95% chance by the year 2050, which is 30 years away from now, we will have a complete disintegration of our human civilization. That means civilization as we know today will disintegrate because of many factors. Alright, and this is the problem that we have, because the political leaders, especially Donald Trump, the Western world, they are not interested. They are pumping more fossil fuel into the market, pumping more CO2, and we have reached the threshold. Never in 300 million years has the CO2 level exceeded 400 parts per million. Now it is 410, and with that there will be so many effects that human being as a being, mammals also included, will all be destroyed within the next 100 years. And that's not far. That means 30 years from now, there will be a disintegration of all civilized world that we know today. That means there will be a chaos. Why? Sea level would have risen 10 to 20 feet. All the coastal cities will be down, whether it is Calcutta, whether it is New York, whether it is Kuala Lumpur, whether it is Singapore, whether it is Shanghai, all will be underwater. And we have this climate change in which the temperature, if it rises more than 2 degrees, the IPCC says, okay, we should not allow it to 2 degrees, but the projection is such, because of the release of methane gas, which is 100 times more potent than CO2 from the Arctic Sea, the hydrate, methane hydrate, and as well as from the permafrost, the temperature will exceed more than 5 degrees. If that happened, then all life on Earth, all mammalian life on Earth will be gone. And that can happen within 100 years. So between 2050 to 2100, if we are not taking action now, all of the mammals will be will completely disappear, because now we are going to the 6th mass extinction, in which species are disappearing from this planet Earth at the rate of 200 species a day. They are disappearing. All right, and when they disappear, we have a collapse of the food crop. When the temperature change, we have a collapse of the food crop, especially the grain, the corn, and so on, and there will be no food. So how are we going to live? There will be no insects. There will be only left with fungi and some bacteria and whatever it is, but that is not enough to have the full cycle of enriching the soil so that we can grow food to feed our 7 billion more human beings on this earth. So, as a Muslim, we must be positive. We know that the existential threat at a societal and global level will affect our family and self. That means if we have political leaders who deny climate change, who deny temperature rise of this global, and who's not taking action, palm more oil, palm more coal, palm more anything and everything, let us all go over the cliff and kill ourselves. That is their mentality. They know. I'm sure their political leaders, their environmental consultants and advisors know what is happening. But we are not taking proactive action to change the course of this disaster. So as Muslims, we must be positive. So how we are going to change the course of this disaster? Reduce our footprint, plant more trees, live in small communities, practice permaculture, which is in our book. Chapter 10 is how we're going to create small community of permaculture, which will be self-sufficient, living in accordance with the law of nature that Allah has ordained, and try to change the inevitable course of human disaster or environmental disaster that will destroy every mammal on this earth. We are the top chain. We are the steward of this earth, and we are bringing every other animals and species on this earth towards disaster through climate change. So what I want to do is to show you a video by Noam Chomsky, a humanitarian, a dissident, human rights activist. Okay, he's a professor from Harvard and MIT and so on, and he is talking about this denial syndrome. But we Muslims, please take proactive action to shape our life in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be His steward, to be His Khalifa on this earth, always striving to make ourselves good, help others to be good, and make the world good, so that all beings on this earth can live in a beautiful earth, pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We hope that we can do that, but we only have 30 years. If we don't do anything now, in 30 years' time, civilization will collapse, billions of people will die of hunger, and within another 50 years, all life on earth will just disappear, except leaving only the bacteria and the fungi. And this is a disaster waiting to happen. With all the scientific data and background, we must do something. That's why, as I mentioned in positive Islamic psychology, we have to become activists to change the global scenario, to become more positive, remove war, nuclear power, killing each other and so on. Try to develop a beautiful world of peace, of justice, of tranquility for all human beings and all goodly life on this earth. Always knowing that we are the Khalifa of Allah on this earth, striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, and making the world good, inshallah.
A couple of weeks ago, the IPCC, the international group of scientists monitoring climate change, came out with a very ominous report warning that the world has maybe a decade or two to basically end its reliance on fossil fuels if we're to have any hope of controlling global warming below the level of utter disaster. And that, incidentally, is a conservative estimate. It's a consensus view. There are repeatedly over the years, it has been shown that the IPCC analyses are much less alarmist than they should be. Now comes this report in Nature that you mentioned a couple of days ago, which shows that there has been a serious underestimate of the warming of the oceans. And they conclude that if these results hold up, the so-called carbon budget, the amount of carbon that we can spew into the atmosphere and still have a survivable environment, has to be reduced by about 25%. That's over and above the IPCC report. And the opening up of the Amazon to further exploitation will be another serious blow at the prospects of survival of organized human society. I should, at the same time, the Trump administration right now is opening up new areas of the West for fracking, for increasing the use of fossil fuels. You've probably seen, maybe discussed, one of the most amazing documents I have ever seen. The Trump Department of Highway Standards, whatever it's called, just issued a long report, 100-page report, urging that all regulations on automotive emissions should be ended. And they had a very logical argument. They said if we extrapolate current trends, by the end of the century, the climate will have warmed several degrees centigrade, meaning a huge rise in sea level, which they underestimate. So basically, we're going over the cliff anyway, and automotive emissions don't really add much to this, so there's no point cutting them back. The assumption of the department is that everyone in the world is as criminally insane as we are and isn't going to do anything about it. And since on that assumption, let's just rob while the planet burns, putting Nero into the shade. He only fiddled while Rome burned. I can't think of anything like this in human history. You just can't find words to describe it. And at the peak of the monstrosity is, in fact, the Trump administration. Now, we should recall that Trump himself, as I mentioned, is a firm believer in global warming. Recently, he applied to the government of Ireland for permission to build a huge wall, one of his famous walls, this one to protect a golf course of his in Ireland, which, as his plea indicates, is threatened by sea level rise as a result of global warming. You take a look at the big banks, J.P. Morgan Chase and the others. They're increasing their investments in fossil fuel development. The energy corporations are working all over the world to try to find new resources to destroy the environment. The media are focusing on real outrages like the ludicrous military preparation for this wave of mothers and children planning to invade us and destroy us. They're concentrating on that. But take a look at their coverage of these things. So there was a big report, long front page report in the New York Times a couple of days ago about the opening up of the West to further fossil fuel extraction. Discussed everything you can think of, did mention some of the negative consequences, like it might harm water resources, it might make things harder for ranchers. Not one phrase in this long report on the effect on the environment. In the political campaign, going on. All kinds of issues are not discussed, but not the two existential threats that the human beings face, threats that have never arisen in human history. We have to make decisions now which will literally determine whether organized human life can survive in any decent form. You can just imagine what the world would be like if the sea level rises, say, 10 or 20 feet or even higher, is within the range, easily within the range of predictions. I mean, the consequences are unimaginable, but it's as if we're kind of like the proverbial lemmings, just happily marching off the cliff, led by leaders who understand very well what they're doing, but are so dedicated to enriching themselves and their friends in the near future that it simply doesn't matter what happens to the human species. There's nothing like this in all of human history. There have been plenty of monsters in the past, plenty of them, but you can't find one who was dedicated with passion to destroying the prospects for organized human life. Hitler was horrible enough, but not that.
The world-renowned professor, linguist, and dissident Noam Chomsky. When we return with him in a moment, he'll talk about the Pittsburgh synagogue attack, the crisis in Gaza, and the U.S.-backed Saudi war in Yemen. Stay with us.